Welcome back to another edition of Baseball for Maniacs. Before I get into the topic of today's episode, yes, I have upgraded the studio. All my Phillies gear has come in. Got the Fight and Phils flag in the middle. Got Schwarbaum over there. Mr. Wheels up top. Citizens Bank Park. And then Bryce Harper sending us to the World Series with his Game 5 NLCS home run. Just wanted to upgrade it for you guys and just kind of get the feel of Phillies baseball back instead of a blank white wall. Also got the Red October flag from 2023. What a year that was until it wasn't. I'm probably going to add some more posters as well because as you can see, there's plenty of space to fill up. But just this kind of lets you guys know I am all in for the Phils this season and going forward, giving you guys as much Phillies content as I physically possibly can because I love doing it, and I hope that you guys love consuming it as well. But now that we got that out of the way, today's episode's topic. So I've been talking a lot about the Phillies, right? That's what I do. I'm a Phillies guy. The Phillies are the most important team in my life. So, of course, the majority of the content is going to be Phillies based. But this YouTube channel is for other teams as well. The name of this channel is Baseball for Maniacs, not just Baseball for Phillies Maniacs. But this team that I'm going to cover today does hold a place in my heart. Not a good place in my heart. It's the beloved New York Mets. So this still kind of relates to the Phillies, obviously, because the Mets are in our division. They're probably going to be the team that threatens us the most for the NL East title. Now, granted, if the Braves stay healthy, they could be a problem. And yeah, they stole Bo Bichette from us, right? Cool. But I'm going to break down how this offseason for the Mets has been quite literally one of the worst off seasons in their history because it just doesn't make any sense. And before I get into all the moves, what I think, what I like, what I dislike, it's a lot of dislike. This is under the notion and the idea that I truly don't think that Steve Cohen and David Stearns are on the same page. When David Stearns came to New York, he came from Milwaukee. He came from an organization that didn't give him a lot of money to play with. So he had to make little intricate moves to build a winner. And he did that to a very, very good degree. Never won it all, but will the Brewers ever win it all? Probably not. So when he came to New York, it was like, man, you get the best of both worlds. You can do those moves as well, and then you get the money to spend. And he has done the intricate moves pretty good, more on the side of the farm system, because he has built the Mets farm system up to where I believe they're the first ranked farm system in Major League Baseball. If they're not number one, they're number two behind the Dodgers. So he's done a great job in that sense. But how he spent his money is just mind-boggling to where what I think has gone on this offseason with the New York Mets is it started off the David Stearns way. The transactions in November, December is going on the blueprint that David Stearns wants. And no, Mets fans weren't liking that, right? But this is really the first offseason David Stearns really got a chance to do that. Because, like, last year, he wanted to let Pete Alonso walk, but his market fell. Steve Cohen, stepped in, right? So, with the Bo Bichette signing, I think that's a Steve Cohen just stepping in and spending money to spend it. And it's just like, I just don't think they're on the same page because spending, and I'm going to get all this on every single move that they've done, but spending money on Bo Bichette and not spending money on Pete Alonso makes 0 sense. Spending money on Devin Williams and not Edwin Diaz makes no sense because Steve Cohen quite literally has unlimited funds when it comes to baseball. He has taken a net loss on the New York Mets the last 2 years, but it doesn't matter to him because this is his toy. This is his fun thing to do. Other owners can't do that. They can't afford to take losses. So in the grand scheme of things, the New York Mets have unlimited money for their baseball team. So why are they penny pitching on other moves, but then just like going silly at the end of the offseason? Doesn't make any sense, right? So I think what Steve Cohen did to let the offseason start is, okay, David Stearns, you do you. I'll step out of it. I'll let the baseball operations people do the baseball operations. But with rich people, they get impatient. The Mets fandom was coming for Cohen's neck. And he even made a tweet and he said, I expect the payroll to be similar to what it was last year, and this is before the Bo Bichette signing. So it was kind of like he played his hand. Steve Cohen, I think, is a great owner. I think if we had 30 Steve Cohens, baseball would be untouchable. Of course, that's physically impossible. Steve Cohen is one of the richest men in sports. But what comes with the background of Steve Cohen is he gets impatient. He has the money, and when he gets backlash from Mets fans, that's where the Bo Bichette signing comes in. And I think that's a huge mistake because it doesn't fit their team. It would have fit the Phillies, and I already know the Mets fans are going to be like, this guy's bitter. This guy just wanted Bo Bichette. Some of that might be true, but I really think this offseason has been a disaster. And in my opinion, or my belief, that's awesome. I love when the Mets met because you know what that means? It means we're going to win the NL East. It means we're going to have another shot of a World Series, and we really don't have to worry about them. The Braves, on the other hand, I think if they stay healthy, they can be a much more legitimate threat than the New York Mets. But let's get into it. First trade they made, Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien. So, this trade was mainly made to save some money because Nimmo has 5 years left on his deal. Marcus Semien has 3. So in the grand scheme of things, the Mets saved $25 million in the deal because obviously Nimmo, I think, was making $5,103. Excuse me. Semien was making $372, but the Mets sent $5 million over to the Rangers. So the Mets saved $25 million in this deal. And a lot of what David Stearns harped on the end of year press conference with the New York Mets was run prevention, right? They wanted to get better on defense because their defense was terrible last year. So Brandon Nimmo, who used to be a really good defender, he was a center fielder. When they signed Brandon Nimmo, they envisioned him as playing center field for around 3 years. Then he'd move to a corner, but he would still be productive. Brandon Nimmo has this weird injury in his leg. I don't know the exact term of it, but he can't play defense anymore because he can't move. He can still track the ball, but he physically can't move. So they traded Nimmo. They brought in Semien. Semien can't hit anymore, but he is a gold glove second baseman. He played shortstop when he was with Oakland. He was a good shortstop. So move him to second. Obviously, the defense is going to improve. And that was kind of in the philosophy of David Stern. So that move, I like for them because it kind of fits the narrative of what they want to do. Now, if they're in the win now mode, I think Nimmo gives them a better chance to win, but it's a long-term move to where they're saving money. But then that goes on the Steve Cohen point to where they don't need to save money. So it's like, I don't know, but I don't hate that move. And then the next move, which I don't like because of what happened afterwards. So they signed Devin Williams to a 3-year, $51 million deal. Now it only comes out to $14 million a year AAV because they deferred some of the money. Now, Edwin Diaz left the New York Mets, and a report came out that he left, not the sole reason, but he was upset with the Mets organization because they didn't go to him and say, we're signing Devin Williams. He found out just like everyone else. Now, that's bad management because Edwin Diaz has been your best closer probably of all time. And why aren't you communicating him that you're signing Devin Williams? Because Devin Williams is a closer. He could have been a setup man, but he has great stuff. He was a great closer in Milwaukee. Struggled in New York, but I could understand why Edwin Diaz sees that signing and it's like, screw you guys. Like, you're bringing in a new closer to replace me. You're not even talking to me about it. So that signing, I would have loved for them. Now, regardless, I hate any good Mets signings because they're the Mets and I'm a Phillies fan, but I'm looking at it from a non-biased point of view. I would have loved that signing if you brought Edwin Diaz back because I think Devin Williams is a lethal setup man. He was at his best when he was setting up for Josh Hader in Milwaukee. Now he's your closer. What did Devin Williams do last year? Struggled mightily in New York. Now, you could say he turned it on in the second half. Maybe. Yeah, he had a better second half, but certain guys just aren't built for New York. And I don't think Devin Williams fits that mold. You put him in the setup role to where you take pressure off of him, and Edwin Diaz is your closer. I love the move. But then you let Edwin Diaz walk. So that move is a bad move now because Devin Williams is now your closer. Good luck, New York. I'm going to be licking my chops when Devin Williams comes into a game at CBP and we light his ass up. And then letting Edwin Diaz walk. He went to the Dodgers for 3 years, $66 million. Now, I think some of it's deferred, but whatever. 22 a year. Are you telling me that Steve Cohen can't afford that? Of course he can afford that. So that goes back to the point. There's no collective cohesion between Steve Cohen and David Stearns. 3 years, 66 for Edwin Diaz. If you would have told me that was the deal he was going to get to start the offseason, I would have been saying, hey, Dave, go make that move because Edwin Diaz is elite. And then you let him go to the Dodgers. You let him go to a team you're going to have to be competing with to go to the World Series. And you could always say, well, with the communication, not telling him Devin Williams was coming, it was a quick move to where you let Edwin Diaz walk. If you got wind that he was talking to the Dodgers and he was upset, you know what you do as a organization with the Mets that has the money of Steve Cohen? You blow them out of the water. You say, okay, you're really that upset? Here's $100 million. But they didn't do that. So it's just like, yeah, Devin Williams is a good reliever, but if he's your closer, if he's your number one, it's a bad move. And then you let Edwin Diaz walk. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's laughable and it's a joy to watch. Now, the next move, letting Pete Alonso walk. So there's this like notion that the Phillies are running it back, and we are, and the Mets are not running it back. And I can understand wanting to let go of certain members of the core. I already talked about Brandon Nimmo being traded. I kind of like that trade. I'm 50-50 on that. We'll get into Jeff McNeil getting traded. That's a great move. One, Jeff McNeil is a loser. He's terrible for the clubhouse. He's a whiny little baby. So getting rid of players like McNeil and Nimmo, I understand for change, right? It's not change just for change. There's motives behind those moves. But letting go of two of your best players with Diaz and then Alonso makes no sense. And this is where it comes back to David Stearns is thinking like a small market GM. He's in New York. I can already see it in those meetings. David Stearns like, well, we really don't want to give a first baseman 5 years at 31 AAV. We don't think he's going to age well. Who cares when you have that kind of money? It makes no sense to where you can afford to take on that risk, to where I believe what would have made the Mets a legitimate powerhouse if David Stearns had that philosophy with the intricate details, like an outfielder coming up like a farm system guy, like that's where he works his magic. But if you have a chance to re-sign your all-time home run leader, which is like 250 or something, like that's a joke. Again, the Mets just being a laughable franchise. They made a huge deal of Pete Alonso breaking the home run record. Okay, dude, like, cool. But Pete Alonso's a great player. Like, as much as I crap on the Mets organization, I'm unbiased. Like, I know good players when I see one. Pete Alonso is going to hit 35 to 40 home runs every single year. His defense at first base sucks, but get this. I don't care about defense when you're hitting 40 bombs, and David Stearns should have cared also. So it's like, yes, change can be good, but their change makes no sense. So letting Pete Alonso walk, just a bad move, dude. So that was unreal. And then their pivot, Jorge Polanco, 2 years, $40 million. Everyone thought he was going to go back to Seattle, but Jorge Polanco was like, oh, and they offered me 2 years, 40. I was kind of surprised, like 20 AAV. I had to take the deal. So it's like, if Pete's making 31 a year and Jorge Polanco is making 20, $11 million was the difference, and I get it, Pete Alonso, 3 years, whatever, but it goes back to the point. Why are you guys penny pinching for guys like that when you have unlimited funds? It doesn't make any sense. And Jorge Polanco is going to play first base. You know how many innings Jorge Polanco has logged at first base in his major league career? One. So it's like, the whole notion of run prevention kind of goes out the window when you're signing someone who's never played a position to play a position. Now, everyone can say, well, if you can play second base, you can play first base. Okay, like I understand that first base is an easier position to play than a middle infield position. But Jorge Polanco, at best, was an average defender. So it's like you're not putting a gold glover over at first to where the transition is going to be seamless. We have no idea what Jorge Polanco is going to be at first base. So that move was hilarious, baffling, and just goes back to the point that I'm going to reiterate. Stop penny pitching. Like, you got Steve Cohen. It does not make any sense. It does not make any sense. And this is a joy to watch. But the next move, traded Jeff McNeil. And I mentioned, I think that's a great move. They ate some money. They got a 17-year-old, whatever. We don't know what he's going to be. But just getting off of Jeff McNeil was a good move because I do think he is a clubhouse cancer. Now, the point of why we're here, the Bo Bichette signing. And I think the Bo Bichette signing was done by one person, Steve Cohen. So the Mets were in on Kyle Tucker on a similar deal to what the Dodgers. I believe they offered him 4 years, $220. But the way they structured the contract was the first 2 years would be $60 million, and then the next 2 would be $50 with an opt-out up to year 2. So they gave him the opt-out after year 2, similar to the Dodgers. So essentially, and then they gave him a $75 million signing bonus. That was the offer. So in reality, because we all expect Kyle Tucker to opt out after year 2, it just makes, if he plays the way Kyle Tucker plays and he has a healthy couple of years, he's going to opt out. So the Mets kind of gave a better offer because there was no deferred money. And I understand doing that short-term deal for a player like Kyle Tucker, especially when you have the pockets like Steve Cohen. So if they would have signed Kyle Tucker, that would have been a phenomenal move. But he took the deal with the Dodgers, right? And then once that happened, because it was Tucker signed, I believe, at like 10:30 at night, and then Bo Bichette was a Met the next day around 12. So it was like 12, 13 hours later. That was Steve Cohen panicking. It was an absolute panic move to where Bo Bichette gets 3 years, $126 million. So it's $42 million AAV. And then if he opts out, which he will, he gets a $5 million opt-out clause. And it's so weird to sign Bo Bichette to that kind of deal when he doesn't fit their philosophy that David Stearns implemented at the start of the offseason, run prevention. Bo Bichette is not a good defender. He's not an awful defender. At best, he's average. So he's going to move to third base. He's never played third base in his entire career. And as much as I dislike the Mets, I'm a huge Brett Baty fan. I think he's a ball player. I think he's a dog because he affects the games in so many facets. He's a phenomenal defender at third and second, and he finally had a breakout year. The prospect that they have been hoping for years, finally broke out in 2025. So why are you signing Bo Bichette? Where's Brett Baty going to play? Is he going to DH, which makes his value go down because he's a good defender? What are you going to put him in left field to where we don't know what he's going to be, to where it just doesn't make any sense? And I think Steve Cohen came in and said, look, the money for Kyle Tucker is going to Bo Bichette. Obviously, it's not the same, right? They're not paying as much, but kind of they are because everyone expected Kyle Tucker to opt out. So if they were going to give him $60 million a year and then Bo Bichette's going to make 42, but really $5 million because we know he's going to opt out, it's a $13 million difference. Like, why are you pivoting to Bo Bichette? Because their starting pitching is terrible. Terrible. And another thing on the Bo Bichette, why I'm so sure he's going to opt out, the free agency class next year sucks on the hitting side. Pitching is elite. You got Skubal, you got Luzardo, cool. But Bo Bichette, and I despise Bo Bichette, he's my most hated person in Major League Baseball because he played us like a lapdog. So June 18th, first game, he comes to CBP as a Met. I will be in attendance. I live in Florida, but I will make time. I will book the flight. I will be there. See you on June 18th, Bo Bichette. But he's going to opt out because he realized if he has a year that he had last year, he's going to get the long-term deal that he wanted. Now, granted, the Phillies offered him 7 years, $200, but I believe if Bo Bichette has a year similar to last year, he could be looking at anywhere from like 8 to 9 years in the $300 million range. So it makes sense for Bo Bichette. And then another point on the whole clubhouse thing, right? Because the Mets clubhouse was great in 24. We saw the OMG, we saw the nonsense, but it was one of the best clubhouses. But then they obviously let JD go, they let Jose Iglesias go, and that clubhouse plummeted because, get this, guys, Francisco Lindor is not a good leader. Juan Soto is not a good leader. So they wanted to improve the clubhouse, Now, trading for Marcus Semien was a good move in that aspect because Marcus Semien's one of the best clubhouse guys in Major League Baseball. That can't be denied. But you're going to sign a guy who is going to opt out. So how it's just going to be a weird vibe around the Mets. Like, he's leaving. He's going to get that long-term deal. And of course you can say, well, Steve Cohen has unlimited money. They're going to sign Bo Bichette. They're going to re-sign him. I think they're going to put all their eggs in their basket for Tarek Skubal. And then it goes back to the point again to where David Stearns is probably going to penny pitch. He's going to be like, well, Bo Bichette works on a one-year deal, but he doesn't work on a long-term deal. They should just sign everyone because they have all the money, but they're not going to do that because there's no cohesion between the two. So that just Bo Bichette signing, it was like, I wasn't upset where he went because I think it doesn't make sense for the Mets to where it's good where he went, but it sucks for us because I truly think Bo Bichette fit the Phillies much better, fit our window, and then fit the team to where he could have been that four hitter. He could have played second, could have played third, to where we really could have competed with the Dodgers. But him going to the Mets is such a Mets move. It's the Mets will Met. Because what was the Mets' problem in 25? It was their starting pitching. What have they done to improve their starting pitching? Absolutely nothing. And then I heard all these reports of like, well, now that Beatty doesn't really have a position, he could be used as a trade piece for Tarek Skubal. Maybe. I just don't think the Tigers are going to trade Tarek Skubal because what that would do to that fan base, the outcry would be detrimental. I think they're just going to rock with Tarek Skubal one more year. They're obviously going to let him walk because they're not going to pay him. They should pay him. Like, if you have a generational talent, you pay the $500 million for Tarek Skubal. But they're not going to do that because it goes back to the point. Their ownership sucks, which is like 90% of Major League Baseball, which goes to the whole other point of should there be a salary cap? I don't really think so because why are you hurting or penalizing the owners that really want to spend? So they have done nothing to improve their starting pitching. And they could have the great offense that they want, but if their starting pitching isn't successful, no, they're not going to make the playoffs. You need starting pitching to make the playoffs. The rotation is Nolan McLean, who I think is a stud. I think he can eventually be the ace of that team and be one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball. But after that, it's not that good. Jonah Tong, I think, doesn't have the mental makeup for Major League Baseball. I think he's a good kid. I think he was put in a terrible position because he needed to be called up because they had no starting pitching. So I like Jonah Tong, but I think the Mets organization failed him. And what he had to go through in 2025, I think is going to have lasting effects for his career. Brandon Sprout sucks. Like, at his absolute peak, he's a 3-4 guy with a high threes, low fours ERA. So he's not anything special. Kodai Senga has no idea where the ball's going. Like, there was an interview with him. He's like, yeah, I have no idea what's going on. So he's not going to help you in the 2026 season. Sean Manaea sucks. He had one good second half because he changed his arm angle, and then the league wasn't able to adjust in that time frame. Guess what? They've adjusted. Boy, have they adjusted, and we saw that in the 2026 season. So it just goes to the point of what are they doing with their money? Now, if they go sign Fromber, this kind of changes that. But if I were the Mets, I would have not spent the money on Bo Bichette. I would have re-signed Pete Alonso because Pete Alonso, I think, is a better player than Bo Bichette from the offensive side. And I would have re-signed Diaz to where if your starting rotation isn't good, but you have a lethal bullpen with Diaz and Williams closing in the back end, you can kind of afford to have average starting pitching. But what I really would have done after all those moves is sign Fromber and sign Ranger Suarez because they needed two bona fide starting rotation pitchers, and they haven't done that. If they get Fromber, it helps, but their main focus should have been starting pitching. And they had a really good offense last year. They had Lindor, they had Soto, they had Pete. Those top three, they did their job. But when pitchers couldn't go 3 innings and then the bullpen got taxed, we saw the collapse. So this entire episode is it's really just me like crapping on the Mets, not just to crap on them. It just shows how clueless of an organization it is. Because if Steve Cohen, he brought David Stearns in, but David Stearns is doing his own thing. There's no cohesion. Like, What the Mets should be doing is just getting whoever they want because they have unlimited funds. And who they choose to spend their money on, it's a mistake. Like giving Frankie Montas 2 years, $34 million. What are you doing? Like, he's not even going to be on the team next year because they designated him for assignment, and he wasn't going to pitch anyway because he had Tommy John. Because the Mets are going to have a top 2, top 3 payroll again, but it's where you're allocating the money. And it's just a joy to see because you just know the Mets are not going to be in contention for the NL East. It's going to be between the Phillies. It's going to be between the Braves. Probably not the Marlins. Probably not the Nationals. I think it's going to be a 2-team race. Sure, the Mets can buy for a wild card spot because, you have 3 wild card spots. The Reds got in last year over the Mets, and the Reds were one of the worst postseason teams ever assembled. I compare it to the 2023 Marlins. So it's going to be fun to watch, and I don't think the Mets are going to make the playoffs. And even if they are buying for a wild card spot, I think those guys in the clubhouse don't have the mental makeup. Soto's going to do his thing, but Soto's not a leader. Soto's the guy that comes in, does his job, gets his stats. Lindor, I think, is a terrible leader. I think he plays well when he doesn't have to be the voice in the clubhouse. When it was Jose Iglesias, when it was JD Martinez leading that. So I think if they're in a wild card race, combined with their starting pitching being average at best, I think there's a real chance the beloved New York Mets are going to miss the playoffs. So that's going to break it. That's going to do it for this episode of Baseball for Maniacs. I probably plan on doing an episode like this for other teams, especially in the NL East. I would probably have to combine the teams of like Miami, Atlanta, Washington, because they haven't really done a lot. So doing a full episode on each individual team wouldn't really make much sense. And then once the season starts getting closer, me and Ryan are going to do division breakdown. So one episode will be previewing the NL East, previewing the NL Central, previewing the NL West. Because like I stated in this episode, of course, this is a Philly pod. Look at the damn background. But I want to give fans of other teams like content as well. I want to be a voice for all. But that'll do it for this episode. I'll come back to you guys with another episode tomorrow. It might be me and Ryan. It might just be a solo pod. But like I said, we're going to be pumping out content every single day. And go Phils.